Tonight's story is called Rapunzel and the Tower She Learned to Leave, a cozy bedtime story made just for you. Hello, dear dreamer. You have done enough today. Let your breath slow. Let your body soften. Nothing is required of you now. This is a story of gardens and stone, of care that once felt like shelter, and of a quiet courage that grows slowly, patiently, inside the heart. It is a story of love that doesn't shout, of tenderness that learns to loosen its hold, and of a path that waits until we're ready to step into it. Inhale the day, exhale the weight of it. You are safe here. Let us begin. The garden lay just beyond the edge of the old paths, where the stones grew thin and the world forgot to name things precisely. It was not hidden by spells so much as by habit. People learned, over time, where not to wander. The sorceress had tended it that way, quietly, patiently, letting the boundaries be marked by seasons rather than fences. In the evening, when the light settled low and amber, she moved among the beds with practiced care. Her hands knew the work even when her thoughts drifted. Roots loosened, leaves were turned. The soil, dark and living, held the warmth of the day. She had once loved this hour best. There had been a time when her strength felt endless, when the garden answered quickly, generously, as if it was grateful for her attention. Back then, she gave without counting, healing, growing, coaxing life where others saw only stubborn earth. These things had felt like extensions of her breath. But the years have a way of changing, even the magic. Now, as she straightened slowly, easing the ache from her back, she paused longer than she was used to. She rested one hand against the low stone wall and breathed in the scent of green. Sharp, fresh, faintly bitter. Rapunzel grew there. Not the child, not yet. The plant. It was an unassuming thing to the untrained eye, a tangle of leaves close to the ground, pale flowers nodding when the wind passed through. It returned every spring, no matter how often it was taken, resilient, modest, alive with quiet persistence. The old ones had named it for that reason. She had planted it years ago, long before she began to feel the thinning of her own reserves. It had seemed wise to grow what renewed itself, wise to keep something near that did not vanish after being asked too much. As she knelt, brushing soil from her palms, something felt off. The space between the leaves was wider than it should have been. The ground disturbed, not by weather or animal, but by a careful hand, someone who had known how to take without destroying. She did not react at once. She simply sat there, the twilight settling around her shoulders, the garden breathing softly at her back. So much of her life had been shaped by giving knowledge, giving shelter, giving cures and counsel, and the slow, patient labor that allowed others to continue on, untroubled by the cost. She had learned, over time, how to accept that most would never notice the weight of it. Still, she touched the torn edge of a leaf, thumb and forefinger closing gently, as if it might bruise under pressure. Later, she would walk the paths beyond the stones. Later, she would listen. Later, she would speak. For now, she remained where she was, letting the quiet settle, the familiar thought that rose, uninvited but unmistakable. After all this, it is still I who must give more. The evening deepened. The garden waited. Not far from the garden, beyond the last thinning line of stones, stood a small house with windows that caught the light poorly. It had once been enough. The man and the woman who lived there had made a life with what was near at hand. They knew the birds by their returning calls. They watched the weather more closely than the calendar. They learned to read the year by what took root and what did not. They did not ask much of the world, and for a long while, the world had answered in kind. Then, the woman grew heavy with child. At first, she carried the change easily. There was a quiet gladness to it, the way her hand rested without thought at the curve of her body, the way she paused more often as if listening inward. She moved through the house slowly, content to let the days pass as they always had. But as the weeks went on, something in her began to thin. She tired more quickly. The work she had once finished without noticing now asked for rest in between. Some mornings she sat at the table long after the light had filled the room, her gaze unfocused, her breath shallow, as though she were waiting for something to arrive. Food lost its hold on her. She ate because she must, not because she wished to. Bread lay heavy, broth cooled untouched. Even the fruits of the season seemed to dull on her tongue. At night, she turned toward the window, drawn to the air beyond it. Her sleep was light and broken, threaded with dreams she could not name. Green dreams, close to the ground, tasting faintly of earth. Once, while standing at the door in the early evening, she lifted her head as if catching a scent. "There is a garden," she said, not looking at her husband. Her voice was quiet, almost absence of request. "Beyond the path." He knew the place at once. Everyone did, though few had ever crossed its edge. The land there always looked fuller than it should have, held together by care that did not invite notice. He said nothing at first. In the days that followed, the woman spoke little. She rested more often, her hand returning again and again to the same place, as if reassured by the steady presence beneath her skin. Sometimes she would wake with her mouth dry, her lips pressed together, her brow faintly drawn, not in pain, but in longing she did not yet have the words for. Her husband watched, unease settling quietly beside him. He tried to bring her what he could, greens gathered from the roadside, herbs from the market, anything fresh enough to resemble what she seemed to be asking for. She accepted them gently, ate a few bites, then turned away without complaint. The house grew still in the evenings. He found himself lingering outside longer than before, listening to the sounds of the path as the light faded. It was easier, somehow, to keep moving than to sit with the feeling that something essential was being asked of him, and that he did not yet know how to answer. He told himself it would only be once. The first time, his hands trembled as he loosened the soil. He took so little he wondered if it would matter at all. When his wife ate and slept deeply for the first time in weeks, relief moved through him so quickly it felt like grace. The second time came more quickly. By the third, the path no longer startled him. His feet knew where to turn. The stones seemed to remember his weight. He told himself the garden was generous, that what grew there had always returned. He told himself that need, once proven, became permission. Evening settled into a pattern. As the house dimmed and his wife turned toward the window in her half-sleep, he would step outside, carrying love shaped like urgency. He did not speak of it. He did not ask. He took. And the garden bore it. The Rapunzel still grew, but more slowly now. The leaves thinned, the soil remembered hands that were not its keepers. What once rose easily after being gathered began to hesitate, as though weighing whether it could. The sorceress noticed long before she named it. She had learned, over years of tending, the difference between natural loss and human taking. She felt it in the way the earth loosened too easily, in the way the growth returned without its former confidence. She worked longer hours. She gave more of herself to keep the balance steady. At first, she waited for the taking to stop. When it did not, she waited again. Each time she found the ground disturbed, the same thought rose, quiet, restrained, familiar, and each time she pressed it back down. But patience, like soil, can only be turned so many times before it thins. So one evening, when the light settled low and amber, she did not turn away. She stood where the Rapunzel grew closest to the path, her basket resting at her feet, her hands still from their work. When the man came, his steps were easy now, his movements practiced. He knelt without hesitation and reached for the plant as he always had. "Enough," she said, not loudly, not sharply, but with the calm certainty of someone who has already decided. He froze. He had not heard her approach. He looked up, startled, shame moving through him, not because he had been caught, but because he suddenly saw the shape of his own choosing laid bare. I would have asked," he said, the words leaving him before he could shape them. She looked at him, truly looked, and saw not a thief, but a man worn thin by love and fear and the quiet knowledge of his own limits. "You are asking," she replied, "just not with words." He lowered his gaze. "My wife is with child," he said. "She weakens when she goes without this. I told myself I would stop." The sorceress knelt and pressed her palm to the disturbed soil. Her touch was gentle, assessing, not the act, but the cost. "You take from what endures. That is why it has lasted this long." The night held its breath around them. "When the child is born," she said, rising slowly, "she will come to me." He looked up, startled, not by anger, but by the finality of it. "I will raise her," the sorceress continued. "She will be kept. She will be taught. She will know the rhythms that hold this world together, and she will be safe." She paused, then added, not as a promise, but as a fact, "She will want for nothing I can give." The words settled between them. The man felt something loosen in his chest, a knot he had carried without knowing its name. He thought of the child, already real to him, and of the narrow life waiting beyond the dim windows of the house. He thought of how quickly love had turned into taking. In that moment, he believed, or needed to believe, the wanting would end. At last, he nodded. The sorceress inclined her head, not in triumph, but in acknowledgement. "Go," she said. "Take what is needed." And he did. And when the child was born, and the house filled with new breath and quiet wonder, the bargain did not feel like a theft. It felt like an ending. Rapunzel did not leave her mother all at once. At first, she did not leave her at all. When the child was born, the small house filled with soft astonishment that always follows new life. The woman held her close, learning the weight of her, the way her breath fluttered like something newly arrived. For a time, that was enough. The world, however, does not pause for wonder. Down the path from the small house, not far, but far enough to feel separate, lived the sorceress. Her home stood near the garden, whole and weathered, shaped by years of work and changing seasons. Its walls were thick, its windows wide, its doors left open more often than they were closed. The air smelled of drying herbs and turned earth, of things meant to heal rather than impress. She came first as help. She brought poultices for the mother, infusions to steady her strength, quiet knowledge offered without display. She never stayed too long. She never asked for more than was given. "She is strong," the sorceress said once, watching the infant with an open, thoughtful gaze. "But strength must be tended." The mother listened. At first, the visits were brief. The sorceress would hold the child while the woman rested, humming low, steady tunes that seemed to calm even the air. When she left nothing behind but ease. As Rapunzel grew, so did the time she spent there. The sorceress taught her small things at first: how to recognize plants by touch, how to feel when soil was ready for seed, how to listen before acting. These were things the parents did not know and could not easily learn. Rapunzel returned home with dirt on her hands, light in her eyes, carrying stories that spilled out faster than her words. "She learns quickly," the sorceress said, not boastfully, but with a pride that felt earned. The mother watched, warmth and unease living side by side in her chest. Gratitude was there, too, gratitude for the rest she was given, for the way her child seemed steadied by the other woman's care. It was the father who spoke first, of staying longer. "She thrives there," he said one evening carefully. "She is watched, she is taught. She will not want." The mother turned the thought over in silence. She loved her child. That much was unquestioned. But love, she was learning, did not always mean holding close. Sometimes it meant allowing another set of hands to carry what you could not always lift alone. "She can come home," the sorceress said, when the thought was finally spoken out loud. "Often. She will not be lost to you." It was then that the tower was mentioned. Not as a demand, not as a decree. The tower had stood for years at the edge of the land, an old watchtower meant for distance and warning, long unused. The sorceress spoke of it plainly, as one might speak of a room already built. "It is high," she said. "The air is clean. From there she can see the garden whole. She will be safe." The mother imagined it, light moving through open windows, space enough for breath and learning. She imagined her child watched over, growing strong under a careful eye. She wept the night the decision was made, not because she believed it was wrong, but because it was real. Rapunzel, too young to understand the shape of change, reached easily for the sorcerer's hand the next morning. She did not know she was leaving something behind. She only knew she was being led somewhere bright. In the beginning, she returned often, then less so. And then the days found their own order. The tower did not feel like an ending. It felt like care. And no one yet thought to ask how long care was meant to last. The tower settled into Rapunzel's life the way routines do, quietly, without ceremony. At first, it felt like an extension of what she already knew. Morning light reached her earlier there. The air moved more freely through the open windows. From that height, the garden unfolded below her in careful patterns she had become to recognize. The darker beds, the lighter ones, the paths worn smooth by years of tending. The sorceress did not climb to her each day. She did not need to. Rapunzel learned the rhythm quickly. She had heard footsteps below. She leaned out and let her hair fall long and pale, a simple solution offered without thought. The sorceress climbed with practiced ease, praising the strength of it, smoothing it gently when she reached the top. "This will save your arms," she said once, almost amused, "and my knees." Rapunzel laughed, pleased to be useful. Days passed in lessons and listening. The sorceress showed her how to dry herbs in bundles that caught the warmth but not the sun, how to tell when roots were ready to be lifted, how to wait before acting. Rapunzel absorbed these things without effort, the way children do when learning feels like attention rather than instruction. When the sorceress worked below, Rapunzel sang. She sang to mark time, to feel the quiet, to feel her own voice move outward and return. The sound traveled easily from the tower, drifting across the garden, settling among the leaves. It pleased the sorceress to hear it, pleased her more than she ever said. She worked more slowly then, her hands lingering in the soil, her head lifted slightly, as though the sound anchored her to the moment. Meals were shared when they could be. Sometimes Rapunzel came down and ate at the long wooden table in the low house near the garden. Sometimes food was brought up, baskets lifted carefully, conversation carried on in easy fragments. There was no strictness to it, no sense of rule, only habit. As Rapunzel grew, the tower grew familiar. She learned where the stone held warmth longest, where the breeze entered first. She learned how to sit in the window so that the light felt just right on her work. The height no longer felt like distance. It felt like perspective. The visits to her parents' house continued, though less often than before. At first, she returned every few days, then every week. The path remained known to her, but it no longer shaped her days. Her mother held her tightly when she came, breathing her in as though to reassure herself she was still real. Her father watched from the doorway, comforted by how steady she seemed, how easily she moved between the two worlds. "She is happy," he would say afterwards, and believe it. And she was, for a long while. The sorceress watched her carefully, not with suspicion, but with a kind of quiet accounting. She noticed how easily Rapunzel adapted, how little she asked for what was not already present. She took comfort in the way the tower held her, the way the days arranged themselves neatly around their shared work. All this remains, she thought, again and again. And Rapunzel, looking down from the window as the evening settled into its familiar hush, believed the same. The world felt ordered. The days felt sufficient. And no one yet thought to ask what would happen when sufficiency began to feel small. The changes did not arrive all at once. They came as small adjustments, each one reasonable on its own, hardly worth naming. Rapunzel spent her days in the tower now, the space shaped gently around her routines. She knew where the stone stayed warm longest, where the light lingered in the afternoon. From the open window, she could see the garden below, the paths, the beds, the familiar movement of the sorceress as she worked. When the sorceress wished to come up, she would stand at the base of the tower and call Rapunzel's name. "Rapunzel!" Sometimes she called only once, sometimes twice. Rapunzel would come to the window and answer, her voice lifting in song, clear and easy, a sound that meant she was awake and listening. After the song came the familiar gesture. She leaned forward and let her hair fall, long and pale, a simple solution offered without thought. The sorceress climbed carefully, trusting what had never failed her. At first, the timing did not matter. If Rapunzel was slow to hear, the sorceress waited. If the song came late, it came late. The days were wide then, generous. But over time, the waiting changed. The sorceress began to linger longer at the base of the tower after calling Rapunzel's name. She listened, not impatiently, not sharply, but with a stillness that carried expectation. Rapunzel noticed. She began to answer more quickly, her voice rising in song sooner, eager to reassure before the silence stretched. The words that shaped the days grew firmer, though they were still spoken gently. Stay where I can see you. Call before you lean out. Wait for me. They were offered as care, and Rapunzel received them that way. She no longer climbed down on her own. There was no single moment when this changed. It simply became easier to stay where she was. If she wished to go below, the sorceress would come for her. If she wished to leave the tower, there was always another time, another day. Soon felt sufficient. Her visits to her parents grew fewer. Not forbidden, just delayed. Another lesson to finish, another evening settling in, another morning already full. Her hair grew longer. At first, it was only useful. Then it became familiar. Then it became expected. The sorceress praised it often now, smoothing it carefully when she reached to the top. "You keep me close," she said once, smiling, "even from so high above." Rapunzel smiled back, warmed by the thought. The tower still felt safe. The days felt ordered. The love between them felt whole. And yet, without anyone intending it, love had begun to rely. And reliance, once settled, quietly learned to expect. The first time Rapunzel heard a voice that was not the sorcerer's, she did not recognize it as anything important. It drifted upward from the edge of the garden, carried lightly on the air, almost lost among the bird song and wind. She paused in her work and leaned toward the window, more curious than alert. "Who sings so high?" the voice asked, not loudly, not boldly, simply wondering aloud. Rapunzel laughed, surprised by the sound of it leaving her so easily. "I do," she called back, her voice falling into the open space below. It felt strange to hear herself answered by something other than an echo. The man stood at a distance, respectful of the paths he did not yet know. He did not look up right away. He listened first, as though the sound itself mattered more than its source. "Well, that's a good place for a voice," he said. "It travels well from there." Rapunzel smiled to herself. They spoke like that at first, in small pieces, unhurried, about the weather, about how the light changed at different hours, about nothing that felt like intrusion. He didn't ask why she was there. He didn't ask how she came to be so high above the ground. He spoke to her as though the tower were simply another place a person might stand. When the sorceress returned to the garden, she noticed the change at once, not in Rapunzel's behavior, but in the air itself. Something had shifted, the way it does when a window has been opened somewhere out of sight. Rapunzel spoke of the man later, as if mentioning a passing detail. "He listens," she said thoughtfully, "before he speaks." The sorceress paused in her work. "That is not always a kindness," she said after a moment. Rapunzel considered this, then shook her head. It felt like one. The meetings continued, quiet and infrequent. Sometimes days passed between them, sometimes weeks. The man never lingered long. He never asked Rapunzel to come closer. He never raised his voice. He only returned. And each time he did, Rapunzel found herself listening differently. Not with anticipation exactly, but with a sense of being met, as though her words landed somewhere they did not have to be shaped or explained. "You seem content," he said once, not as a question, not as a challenge. "I am," Rapunzel replied, and meant it. He nodded, accepting this without argument. "And yet," he added gently, "contentment is not the same as completeness." The words settled without demand. Rapunzel did not answer right away. She watched the garden below, the careful order of it, the familiar movement of the sorceress among the beds. Everything she knew was there, everything that had held her. "I have everything I need," she said at last. "I believe you," he replied. "I just wondered if you ever wonder what you might choose if choosing were simple." He did not wait for an answer. That was the difference. When the sorceress climbed the tower that evening, she found Rapunzel quieter than usual, standing at the window even after the light had shifted. "You should come inside," she said. "The air is cooling." Rapunzel turned, obedient as ever, and yet something lingered behind her eyes, a thought not yet formed. That night, Rapunzel dreamed not of leaving, but of standing still while the world moved around her. It was a small dream, a gentle one, but when she woke, the tower felt just slightly less like the whole of the sky. Nothing changed at once. That was what unsettled Rapunzel the most. Not the presence of the man in the garden below, but the way her days continued as they always had, even as something inside her shifted its weight. The tower still caught the light first in the morning. The garden still moved in its careful patterns below. The sorceress still came when called, her hand steady, her voice familiar. And yet, Rapunzel found herself listening differently now, not for footsteps, but for pauses, not for calls, but for the space that followed them. When she sang, her voice sounded the same to her ears, but she noticed how long it had lingered in the air afterward, how it traveled beyond the garden's edge before fading. She wondered where it went when it left her. She had never wondered that before. The man did not come every day. He did not need to. His absence did not feel like lack. It felt like room. When he did appear, he spoke as he always had, quietly, without urgency, as if conversation were something to be set down gently and returned to later. "You think a great deal," he said once, after a long silence. Rapunzel smiled. "I always have." "Yes," he agreed. "But now you seem to be listening to yourself think." She turned that over. Below them, the garden breathed in its familiar way, leaves lifting and settling with the light. The sorceress worked there, attentive as ever, her movements practiced, purposeful. "She has given me everything," Rapunzel said, not defensively, simply stating a truth that she had always known. "I can see that," he replied, "and she has done it well." That mattered. He did not diminish what had been given. He did not suggest it was false or cruel. "And she worries," Rapunzel added softer now, "if I'm not where she expects me to be." "That is a heavy thing," he said gently, "to be someone's certainty." The words stayed with her. Later, when the sorceress climbed the tower, Rapunzel noticed how carefully she smoothed her hair, how her hand lingered a moment longer than before. "You are quiet," the sorceress said. Rapunzel hesitated. "I was thinking," she said finally, "about how long I have been here." The sorceress's expression did not change, but something in her posture did. A subtle tightening, a drawing inward. "You have always been here," she replied. "You are safe." Rapunzel nodded. That was true. Still, that night, as she lay listening to the wind move through the open window, she felt the days arrange themselves in her mind. Not as a single, endless shape, but as a line with a before and an after. She did not yet imagine leaving. She did not imagine staying forever. She only imagined choosing, and was surprised to realize she did not know how. It was not a frightening thought. just a tender one. And tenderness, once noticed, does not easily return to sleep. The moment did not arrive with thunder or raised voices. It came the way most turning points do, disguised as concern. The day had been warm, the kind that lulled the garden into a slow, fragrant quiet. Rapunzel stood at the window longer than usual, watching the light move across the beds below. She did not sing right away when her name was called. The sorceress waited. She called again, her voice steady. Practice. Rapunzel! Rapunzel answered then, her song soft and unhurried, drifting down like reassurance. She leaned forward, letting her hair fall as she always had. But when the sorceress climbed, her movements were quicker than before, not rushed, intent. "You should not wait so long," she said when she reached the top. Her hands moved immediately to Rapunzel's hair, gathering it, smoothing it, checking its length as if for damage unseen. "I was only watching the light," Rapunzel said. It was the truth. She offered it easily. The sorceress nodded, but did not smile. "You must be careful," she replied. "From here, even small delays matter." Rapunzel felt the words settle strangely. Delays. Matter. She followed the sorceress inside, obedient as ever, but her steps were slower now, as if some part of her wished to remain where she was. The room felt smaller than it had this morning, though nothing had changed. "You have been spending too much time at that window," the sorceress continued, arranging things that had not needed arranging. "Your voice carries farther than you realize." Rapunzel hesitated. "It always has," she said gently. "Yes," the sorceress answered, "and that is precisely why it must be guarded." The quiet between them lengthened. Rapunzel sat on the edge of the bed, folded her hands in her lap. She did not feel frightened, only unsettled, the way one does when a familiar room is rearranged without warning. "I spoke with someone today," she said carefully, "not as a confession, not as a challenge, simply as truth." The sorceress's hands stilled. "Who?" she asked. "A man who walks the paths near the garden," Rapunzel replied. "He listens." The word hung there, light and dangerous all at once. The sorceress turned then, really turned, her expression composed but sharpened by something Rapunzel had not seen before. "You do not know his intentions," she said. "People do not always come with what they claim." "I know," Rapunzel said. "He did not ask me for anything." That seemed to trouble the sorceress more, not less. "That is how it begins," she said quietly. "With listening, with space, with questions that feel harmless." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You have everything you need here." Rapunzel looked at her, at the woman who had raised her, taught her, held the world steady around her for so long. She saw the love there. She saw the fear too. "I know," she said again, and this time it was the fear she was answering. The sorceress reached out and took Rapunzel's face in her hands, her touch firm but not unkind. "Then stay," she said. "Stay where I can keep you safe. Stay where nothing can take you from me." The words landed heavier than they were meant to. Rapunzel felt something inside her shift, not away, but awake. She understood suddenly that the care she lived inside had begun to need something from her in return. Not gratitude, not obedience. Stillness. She did not pull away. She did not argue. She only nodded. Later, alone again, Rapunzel stood at the window and let her hair fall through her fingers. It felt the same as it always had, strong, familiar, warm from the sun. But now she understood what it was. Not just a bridge, a tether. And once seen, such things cannot be unseen. The evening came quietly. Light rested on the garden in its familiar way, settling into the paths Rapunzel knew by heart. From the window of the tower, she looked down once more, not in longing, not in fear, but in recognition. Below, the sorceress called her name. Rapunzel! Rapunzel went to the window. She did not sing. Instead, she gathered her hair into her hands and let it fall, long and pale, over the stone, offering the familiar path without the familiar sound. The sorceress climbed as she always had, hand over hand, trusting what had never failed her. When she reached the top, she stepped into the room and stopped. Rapunzel was not waiting at the window. She stood further back, near the door, steadied and unafraid. They looked at one another for a long moment. "You were ready," the sorceress said. "Yes," Rapunzel replied. "Because of you." The words were not farewell, nor defense. They were simply true. Rapunzel gathered her hair and laid it carefully over the iron hook set into the stone, the one that had held it for so long. She tested its weight once, then turned towards the opening. "I will go now," she said, "and I will come back." The sorceress did not answer at once. Then she nodded. Rapunzel began to climb, slowly and with care, the way she had once watched others climb up. Stones passed beneath her hands. The air cooled as she descended. The ground rose to meet her. When her feet touched the earth, she let go. She stepped back and looked up. The sorceress stood at the window, her hands resting on the stone. For a moment, she did nothing at all. Then she reached forward and lifted Rapunzel's hair from the iron hook. She let it fall. The long, pale length slipped downward, pulling softly on the ground, so that nothing remained to hold Rapunzel there, and she could walk away. Neither of them spoke. Rapunzel turned toward the path. She went out into the world. Time passed, and in time she returned. Not at once, not every day, but often enough that the path did not forget her. She came when the light lay gently on the garden. She sat at the long wooden table near the low house, and she shared what she had seen. She listened when the sorceress spoke of the old ways, of seasons that turned whether one wished them to or not. And the tower stood still. But it was no longer the only place Rapunzel was known. Others came to the garden as well, women who carried their own knowledge, their own weariness. Some stayed for a time, some returned again. The work widened. The days found new rhythms. The sorceress remained. She tended what was hers to tend. She watched more than she held. What she had feared did not come to pass. Rapunzel did not disappear. And Rapunzel, living where her choosing could breathe, learned that love could stretch without breaking. Sometimes, when the light rested just so, she sang. Not to be answered, not to be reached, only because the air was open and the song belonged to it. And now, dear dreamer, we close the chapter of Rapunzel's story and open this quiet moment just for you. Because the truest tales do not end with fireworks or crowns. They end the way real change does, softly, quietly, with the heart remembering its own voice. Strength is not always a leap from a tower. Sometimes it's the long patience of staying and the courage of knowing when it's time to go. Sometimes it's a girl who once mistook confinement for safety, who learned slowly and tenderly that love is not a cage, and freedom need not be a storm. And sometimes strength is kindness, chosen on purpose, even when it hurts. A letting go that blesses instead of breaking. If ever you doubt your own courage, think of her, of Rapunzel, who stood in the quiet between two worlds, who listened to the small voice inside her chest, and who stepped gently into a life that finally belonged to her. Because bravery is not the absence of fear, it's a decision to move, softly, honestly, towards yourself. Now, the garden is still. The grasses are whispering in the wind. The tower stands, smaller than it once seemed, and the night is keeping watch over you. Sleep now. You are safe. You are loved. You've been listening to Nikki Wu Cozy Stories, written by Nicole T. Woodard. May your dreams be gentle and your sleep be deep.